Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, March 31st. Brian Split, it's report day.
It is report day, and it's the end of the quarter. It's crazy the year is going by so quickly.
Time does seem to fly. Grain markets are mixed here. It is 5:29 a.m. Central Time as we speak. So big report today. Brian, first off, I would like to speak to whoever it is that schedules these reports. This is like maybe the biggest USDA report of the year. It's definitely one of the biggest USDA reports of the year. They're releasing it on Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. The grain market's only open till 1:20. So we get this big report, this big data dump from USDA, acreage, grain stocks, all of that stuff. And then we've got 2 hours to trade it, and then the market's closed for 2 days. That I have an issue with. I also have an issue with the fact that the reports are released at 11 a.m. Central, like when the markets are open. So me and you and everybody else, we've got to sit around now for 5, 6 hours until the report comes out, and we just sit there and wait, right? The reports, when I run the USDA, the reports will come out at like 7 in the morning. They'll do what they do in the stock market, like they'll halt the trade pending news, and then the news will come out, and they'll let the markets reopen, half an hour or an hour after. I'm not a big fan of the current system.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just kept the trading hours the same and just released it during the pause.
Yeah.
But I would say that there is one benefit to having it open during trade, and that is that we have seen the proclivity for limit up or limit down trades decrease quite a bit because the market's open, so we tend to trade through prices a lot. Where when the report was released during a period where the market was closed, we tend to open at or near limit in one direction or the other, and you really didn't have time to to react, or the opportunity to react in between the release and that close to limit opening. So there's good and bad to it, but I definitely get your point.
I see what you're saying too. My counter argument to that would be that releasing it while the market's open, it probably favors like big money, like people
Algos,
with black
absolutely.
boxes and
Yes.
algorithms, like the Ken Griffins of the world, people like that. Whereas farmers and people like me, at least, I mean, I'm pretty fast. It takes me a couple minutes to look at this stuff. I mean, it's not ideal for me. Anyways, you guys have seen the estimates by now. I mean, we're looking for about 91 million acres of corn, just over 88 million acres in soybeans, all wheat, just under 49. I've seen your ag market estimates. Do you have any big, bold predictions outside of what you guys have issued?
No, I just tend to think that the key word for this report is intentions, and so I think the corn intentions were big at the beginning of March, and
Yeah.
maybe economics and planting conditions will change that, but I don't know that I would be in the camp of sub 90 million at this point.
Yeah, and me and Matt talked about this the other day. I think the trade is actually priced in something above 91. That's my personal thought. I mean, I know that this is the average trade guess among analysts polled by Reuters or whatever. I think we're probably trading something closer to 92, if I had to guess, just a personal opinion. We often will also see a surprise in the grain stocks, which is these are numbers that are not as well understood, I guess I would say, as the acreage. Acreage, everybody knows what acreage is. Grain stocks are a little bit more complicated, but you'll often see it, especially in corn stocks. I mean, the trade has a history of missing stocks by 100 million bushels, 200 million bushels. I mean, that's pretty normal, actually.
It is, yeah, and that is a number where that is product that is there or not there, and so that has an immediate impact on the balance sheet. On the acreage side, that is something that's still fluid that can change.
Right.
But yeah, when you see these 100 or 200 million bushel misses from the trade versus what the USDA actually says, that's where you get these big moves immediately.
Yeah, I think that the general idea is that the stocks numbers are real. It's real data. It's past data. The acreage numbers, it's an indication of what could happen, but most often the March 31st numbers are not the same as the final numbers, and very often they don't even resemble each other. So things certainly have the ability to change. So big report. This is out at 11 a.m. Central Time today, guys. ADM weighing options to stay in Russia. So earlier this week, we had news that Cargill and Viterra said that they'd be exiting the Russian export business. ADM is not a huge player in Russia. They've got a 50% stake in a joint venture with a Russian company. An ADM spokesperson said this: the situation in Russia remains fluid, and we will continue to constantly monitor and evaluate our limited activities there. All of this stuff has been it's been friendly the wheat market, just kind of like all the uncertainty. You talk about maybe a Russian export halt, then maybe a Russian price floor. Now you've got these Western companies essentially being forced out of Russia. I mean, I don't know if it's bullish or not, but I think the trade's taking it that way.
Yeah, the wheat market's definitely benefited recently from a surge of talk about ongoing tensions in the Black Sea region, and we went right to resistance on hard red wheat, and went kind of to some spots that we've been failing at pretty consistently since actually July, with maybe the exception of that run up that we had in October, where
Yeah.
everything made those highs and fall. But I think the bottom line is, whether it's U.S. Firms that are doing this, is grain going to be leaving the region or not? And
It sounds
that's
like it
going to
will
be the
be.
bottom line. Yes.
It sounds like Russia is going to kind of insert their own people into these operations, whether that's a Russian grain company or Russian government. It kind of sounds like they almost want to nationalize. I mean, is what a couple of these articles have kind of like hinted at. Like Russia, Moscow, they want more control over all of this. So I guess it's bullish. I don't know if it actually disrupts grain flows, but Russia's the biggest wheat exporter on the planet, and that's why this is a big deal. We sold some more corn to China yesterday, a smaller amount this time around. You got, 7 million bushels or so. But this is a trend. 11 flash sales since March 14th, totaling 128 million bushels. So we've got all sorts of political tensions with China, but I guess our corn is still good, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about this for weeks, that this was the time of year where we really needed to see these sales kick in, and so far here they are. That we're not going to get any change to the balance sheet today on the report, so this is just purely stocks and acres. Once we get into April, they're going to take these quarterly stocks and rectify that into the balance sheet. But all of these sales that we've had that have accumulated over the last couple of weeks, I think, have to be addressed on the April WASDE report. In the March WASDE, they reduced corn for export by 75 million bushels. And then here we are in the last couple of weeks, we've sold more than that, pretty much just to China specifically. So I think the April WASDE report has to probably address the amount of sales we've seen to China the last few weeks.
Yeah, this is kind of, I mean, they've gone on these buying sprees on and off here the last 2 or 3 years now. And it doesn't, the stuff I've heard in terms of like the rumor mill suggests that they may not be done and that we may see some more of this. We also had the weekly export sales report out yesterday. Corn sales were down on the week, but that's because the prior week we had those three like big China sales included. But we're still over 1 million metric tons, which is fine. Soybean sales were up on the week. Wheat sales up on the week. The statistic for corn right now, accumulated export sales are down 33% versus the same period last year. USDA says we're going to be down 25, but again, this report didn't include some of the more recent flash sales. So we could, like you said, very easily meet or exceed these USDA projections now. They may need to come right back up.
Yeah, I think we're bridging the gap right now with some of these recent purchases. And I wouldn't be surprised after a few weeks if we continue to see this type of business in China, where we're actually ahead of the pace that we need to be at versus USDA's goals.
Why do you think China's buying corn? Do they need the corn? Are they stocking up because they're going to invade Taiwan? Are they buying it because it's competitive? What's your thoughts there?
Yes.
All of the above.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will buy it when they need it, and
Yeah.
they tend to need it right now, and they're purchasing it, and we're cheap, so we're very competitive, and that's always something that I have at the back of my head is when you think about what China has accomplished over the last several years with COVID, and then the amount of product they were able to buy at multi-decade lows, whether it was corn, soybeans, taking delivery of crude oil at negative values. So is there something bigger picture? These are long-term planners right now that we're dealing with, and only they know exactly what they have in store for their big picture plans. So you just have to wonder when they go on these large binges of buying, if they're stocking up for something to come down the road, but time will tell.
Argentina is a mess. No surprise here, but the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange left their estimates for the country's corn And soybean crops unchanged this week. They've got the bean crop still at 25 million. Prior to the growing season, USDA had it penciled at 51. So they've got less than half of a soybean crop in Argentina. Corn is similar, 36 million, unchanged from their previous estimate. That number was 55 million. That's what USDA had penciled in prior to the growing season. Argentina is going to be forced, in all likelihood, to import a substantial amount of soybeans from Brazil in order to keep the processing plants running. That's a factor that could perhaps reduce the global impact of this monster crop in Brazil. Argentina has had its worst drought in 60 years. Is this all priced into the market, do you think?
I tend to think so. I mean, we've been dealing with this Argentina story for quite some time, and I think we're at the period for the crop itself developmentally where it's going to be difficult to take any large chunks out of it. So now, at this point, I think if we're going to see any additional bullishness out of Argentina, it's probably going to have to be where we start getting rain and then we just keep getting it, and then it prevents them from getting the crop out of the field, or you see a 2016 type event where it floods and you lose 4 or 5 million tons because of flooding. But without something like that happening, I think we're going to probably see this crop stabilize around 25 million tons for the soy crop here.
The last time they released a report, I think they said that they had a downward bias, and I'm not sure if that's still the case. So I guess the number could still come down further. We'll see what happens. To U.S. weather, we do still have a drought. Now, you go back several months, and you had drought across parts of the Central Corn Belt, the Mid-South, the Southeast. All that stuff's still gone, but the more long-standing drought in the Southern Plains, Central Plains, Western Corn Belt still very much intact. We're going to see our first set of national winter wheat ratings out on Monday afternoon, I believe, and they're not going to be good.
Right, and so that is something. When I talked to producers, there has been definitely an improvement over the last few weeks out west, in Colorado, Kansas, and we had some guys tell me that the crop is actually greened up and looks pretty good. But these national ratings, I think, are going to be pretty important. And this hard red crop, we continue to see hard red gain on soft red for the winter ready. And then, we're going to be looking at another round of snow up north, and that's going to be something that these spring wheat producers are going to be looking at, and not just spring wheat, but corn and soybeans in those areas as well. We're already hearing people talk about potential prevent plant, and I know it's pretty early, but it's definitely something that's on the radar.
So we do have quite a bit of snow cover up north still. You look at parts of South Dakota, a lot of North Dakota, a lot of Minnesota, northern part of Wisconsin. There's still snow cover. There's not going to really be a big warm up. I mean, maybe a little bit this weekend, maybe a little bit the following weekend. I was looking at the GFS this morning, and it looks like there's at least a chance that there's a big warm up, like say middle of April, but that's a ways off. And those forecasts can be wrong. So this is still an issue. I mean, every time I talk about this in the videos, I get a whole bunch of comments back from people about how it's going to be a late spring. There could be some acreage switching, all sorts of messy stuff. So this is definitely an issue, no doubt. Wanted to get to some economic data here. U.S. unemployment claims ticked up for the first time in 3 weeks, but we're still really low, like 198,000. I mean, the labor market is still fantastic. If we're going into a recession, Brian, this is like the most telegraphed recession of all time.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I was just in Florida, in Orlando, over the weekend with the family for spring break, and we did the Disney thing, and it did not feel like a recession there, put it that way.
Yeah, it really doesn't feel like it anywhere. And if there is a recession coming, I think people are prepared for it. I know there's been some statistics indicating that people have dialed back spending and that sort of thing, but man, I don't see it out in the real world. And the labor market is incredible. There's a ton of job openings, and there's like 2 job openings for every job seeker. And I know a lot of those job openings, people say, oh, those are fake job openings. Probably some of them are, but it's still the labor market is still very strong, and that leads to inflation too. If the wages stay up, I mean that's inflationary in itself. Have you looked at a cattle chart this week, because this rally back has been awfully impressive?
It has, and I thought that, incorrectly, that maybe cattle was the next on the list because we had, the natural gas market, and then we had corn, and then we had wheat, and then we had crude oil and beans, and everything kind of, it was like the funds and hogs. The funds kind of one at a time really reduced their length, and we had cattle pull back a little bit, but nothing as major as what we've seen some of these other markets do. So it came back very aggressively, right back to recent highs. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Cash cattle was strong yesterday, 165 to 167 in Texas. Trade as high as 170 in Nebraska, which is up drastically. You know what my crazy thought in the back of my head was? I saw the liquidation in some of these markets where there was a lot of fund length, like in cattle, in the bean market, in the meal market. It happened around the same time that those bank failures were happening. And like, I don't know if the two are intertwined, but like, so we sold off in those markets, and you saw some liquidation in those markets during that time. And now those markets have all kind of bounced back now that the banking issues have been resolved. Is that a crazy thought, do you think?
No, I think from the fund manager perspective, it's kind of like, hey, let's shoot first and ask questions later. And whenever you see a potential major event like that, I think the fund manager needs to get liquid and know exactly where they are and reduce their positions. That's what they did. And a lot of these markets, they've been long for a reason. There's still a story there. And so I think once they kind of liquidated and the story calmed down, and they were able to come back in and reestablish some length, knowing that how the government was going to handle these bank failures.
Outside markets this morning, guys, US dollars up just a little bit. The stock market's marginally higher. Dow Jones up about 80 points. Bonds are off a little bit. Precious metals mixed. Crude oil's up 44 cents in the May WTI at 74.81. Brian Split, thank you for joining me early this morning. Good luck with the report. Have a nice weekend, buddy.
Likewise, Joe. Thank you.
See ya.